stand and do the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public reschedule. You were in here first.
So I am just wondering, and I'm probably gonna have to come back for another, to get on the agenda or whatever, but I have taken the death investigator course. I took it back in July. I know Phil has been busy and this and that with everything that's been going on with the vote and this and that. It's something that I am interested in partaking, helping out with the county. I'm not looking, I know that there's, and there are 4 people is what you guys have, but I'm willing to become a floating, so I don't know if that needs to be for more discussion at a later time, but I just like to make it known that I am very interested in helping out.
Good.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks.
Anybody else here on public discussion? If not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda and minutes dated October 25th?
We got questions.
That's next.
Oh, that's next. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes or agenda? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Next, we have discussion, decision, review, and approval of the claims.
The sheriff's office, Will Summers, $200 for training. I think he did one for that. Is there one left?
He doesn't. That would be, is he in Marion County now?
So what-
I know he was up here for some stuff. I saw that on Facebook. He was up here doing training.
Oh,
He was providing it.
Okay. Also, he was the instructor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I never talked to Roger about it specifically, but I did see it on Facebook. And he was the one giving the training, yeah.
And the assessor is $393.12 for a room. Is that one room or 2 rooms?
2 rooms, I checked that too, because I saw that it was for
Oh,
Chris,
Steve.
Judy and Chris.
Okay. All I got.
We didn't have that.
Credit card.
Oh, yeah. Oh my god, I put it, oh yeah, okay.
And the only thing I always question about was that attorney bill for the assessors in that state line. And I talked to Judy about it, and that should be it, that's over now. And we don't have to write them a check back, it's gonna be applied to their next quarter, their next taxes.
I had a question about the, pressure washer for the engineers department. With the, I'm assuming it's a new one, I don't really know anything about it, I don't remember approving anything like that in here. But the grand total's just shy of 11,000, it's 10,742 and 48 cents. Our prior approval is 5,000 that we do at the beginning of the year, so.
I happened to be out in the field, I seen a company with a brand new hot seat, but I have some missing that's a hot seat. Look at it, had a burner on it.
It says
Yeah, it
Alcoa.
says Dakota. Oh,
Yeah.
it's red, I guess I just assumed it's hot seat, usually hot seats are the red ones.
Yeah, I don't know, but we have $11,000 bill here now.
Want to call Doug and have him explain it, or?
I mean, we could, but it's more of a policy thing, cause he's always thought doesn't apply to that, and I went back to the minutes to find the language, and it says approve the spending limit for any one item of $5,000 for elected officials and department heads. Prior authorization from the board will be needed if the dollar amount is above 5,000.
Why don't you dial Doug up, have him come up?
101.
What about parts, nothing, I don't know, for parts,
one item would be, I mean, should.
Feedback reports are less nice keeping stuff rusher. But this would be different, same work.
No, and I mean, I'm not saying we wouldn't approve it, but there should be, we should follow the procedure. And these, Tammy, these are all the same, what's on the computer, right?
I don't know if those are on the computer.
Oh, these are not?
I don't know if they are.
Oh.
Those are credit cards.
The credit card ones are not on.
The dollar amount would be, right?
Yeah, but the individual.
The invoices and stuff, yeah.
Good morning.
Morning, Doug.
Question for you.
Yeah, I see a new pressure washer, I'm assuming, in the bills here.
Okay,
It's almost $11,000 total, but, so that's why I'm asking about it.
yeah, we bought it, I guess.
Is that for a certain shop or?
The mechanic shop, we're converting over to LP burner,
Okay,
so.
Go ahead, until I ask you, tell me why you're questioning.
cause the first meeting of every year, we approve prior authorization for elected officials and department heads. And the language in the minutes is to approve the spending limit for any one item of $5,000 for elected officials and department heads. Prior authorization from the board will be needed if the dollar amount's above 5,000. And that's why I'm asking.
That was for emergency FEMA, wasn't it?
No, that's an every year deal.
So, I guess we've had these discussions before, but it's difficult for the road department to even operate that way. There are times where we might have to decide on some sort of a repair on equipment. I guess I've never been questioned before, or we've had a question one time when they were talking about FEMA events, and they had to have a resolution, some sort like that.
This
I
would
mean,
be a part, would it? I mean,
No,
and I'm not
but-
saying we wouldn't buy
but we
it.
gotta replace things when they start, needing repairs.
Yeah, but we have to get new software for computers, we have to fly the county every 3 years, all that stuff gets approved. It's just following the policy and same procedure for everyone, so.
I am tasked with the construction, maintenance, and operation of the secondary road department. I have budget that I follow, I always have, and when things are needed, we have to purchase them.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a question for Doug, it was as much for the board as Doug.
Any more discussion?
Well, you know, that is a policy, but maybe for the engineer, we're gonna have to make exception to the policy and make it a higher number or something, because this one, you know, a load of rock doesn't cost $5,000, but the whole bill is over $5,000. How do you wanna do that? For parts?
Yeah, I mean, and it says one item, so I don't know that rock would qualify under that.
Well, repairs would, you'd have a lot of repairs over 5,000.
Repairs could, yeah.
That's a repair, it's just, he's gotta get the stuff running.
But this, and that's, I mean, we had big repair bills before and I didn't bring any of them up. This is something that I'm sure has been planned for a while, it just didn't come to the boardroom. I didn't know anything about it till it was on our bills.
Well, you wanna do something, then you're gonna have to have an action and have it on, make a request to have it put on the agenda.
To review that policy or what? I mean,
That's what we're talking about.
okay, I mean, do you want a motion to review that?
You can request to have it put on the agenda.
Okay, I would like to have that on our next meeting's agenda.
So then all the big ticket items, Doug, like, you ask us to be myself, I ask us to be Brian and all that stuff. You've always been excellent with that stuff, in my eyes.
Any more discussion on the claims? Do I have a motion to approve the claims?
So moved.
Motion by Casey, second by. I'll second it. Any more discussion on the claims? Do a roll call vote, please.
Stecker,
I'm gonna abstain.
Casey,
Yes.
Lost,
Yes.
Platt,
Yes.
Jerks.
Yes.
Correct.
Nick, one.
2:30. Shorty.
We better appoint him first, or appoint her first.
And the resolution.
Yeah, do the resolution. The resolution number would be. You're up next.
Okay, well, when we did our budgets last time, we knew we were gonna have someone retiring, and she did, so I need to have a deputy in my tax department, so, Connie stepped up and said she would be willing to do that, so. I think, was it Roger Swears that we're in, or?
With that, do I have a motion to approve Connie Ludwig as deputy treasurer for the tax department? And the resolution number is 11-1-2201.
So moved.
Motion by Stecker, second by Platt. Do a roll call vote, please.
Stecker,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Lost,
Yes.
Platt,
Yes.
Jerks.
Yes. Connie. Would you repeat after me and I'll let you read it?
Okay, ready for the last one? All right, thank you.
Yep. I, Connie Ludwig, do solemnly swear that I support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa.
I, Connie Ludwig, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa.
and that I will faithfully and impartially do to the best of my ability discharge all the duties of Deputy Treasurer of Kossuth County as of now and hereafter is required by law.
And that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, just discharge all the duties of Deputy Treasurer in the County of Kossuth as now or hereafter is required by law.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Keep signing. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
The last one lasted a long time.
Did it last this long?
I don't know.
Let's see.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are you ready? Discussion to change EAP providers.
Yeah, so I got a call from ISAC last week, and ISAC is switching EAP providers. I think you have the information in your packets. But they are going to be switching, and right now we piggyback off of ISAC, so we don't contract with them, but we piggyback off of what they do. It will be a cost increase, a little bit higher, $20.40 a year per employee. They're changing because right now, EFR isn't giving what they feel that their employees deserve. They're not advertising and making available some of the stuff that they think they're paying for. So they are switching over and wanted to know if we want to switch or if we want to stay with EFR. If we stay with EFR, we're on our own. Oh, sure, so, and Donna can probably explain it a little bit better than I can because she deals with it, but, their services like employee. Oh.
They stand for.
Yeah, EFR is
Employee resource, I'm gonna crucify, I usually know my acronyms, but
and
just know
EAP is employee assisted.
Employee assistance program, and
Yeah.
EFR now offers 6 sessions per employee. I think the new program was indicating that they would offer 3 sessions, but per incident. And our utilization has been pretty low, quite honestly, but I think it's, the new program, I think we'll do some marketing, we'll offer some services that could maybe be approached from the convenience of your home, telehealth, and that's just the culture we're in right now, so I think that that's probably one of the main things.
In the email that they sent, they mentioned we only had one person utilize it in the last year. And that's kind of their concern, and why they're switching is we're paying for this service that nobody's using because they're not marketing it and making employees aware of what services they have to offer. So the new company is a little bit more proactive, so employees would know what they have to offer, maybe utilize some of the services. So I recommend switching and following ISAC's lead, but that's kind of it.
Do I have a motion to approve Care Bridge services for workers?
I would make that motion.
Motion by Stecker, second by
Second,
by Laws. Any more discussion?
and that'll be a January 1st, 2023 start date for that.
Is that what that says there? Do you know, Donna?
We pay quarterly, and honestly, we just get the bill because ISAC handles it, but I would assume I just got their 4th quarters in the mail, so.
In the email, it says January
I'm
1st.
assuming, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it said we find it easier to roll this out with our wellness program in January rather than a mid-year change, so yeah.
Mhm.
okay, yes.
Any more discussion on the topic? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimous. Dan, Veterans Affairs.
Thank you, Donna.
Bye.
Good morning. First, I just want to thank the board and Andy for the assistance on the handicap doors over at the annex. They're installed yesterday, it's working beautifully, much needed addition, very much appreciated. So just wanted to convey that. Wanted to share with the board consideration for providing a resolution to the county for Operation Greenlight. Operation Greenlight is a program that was, the concept was developed by the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, which would be my national headquarters, in conjunction with the Association of Counties. And what it conveys is the week of November, Veterans Day, the 7th through the 13th, simply lighting a green light in a place of business or the home to show the support for veterans who have served in the county, who have sacrificed as a result of their service for the county in a show of support. It's kind of a challenge for some veterans every year about this time to get into the holiday season. It can be a rough time for a veteran, and in particular their families, especially those that are serving overseas and are gone from home. Having spoken to that myself, it's not the same when you're 7,000 miles from home in a combat zone and people are coming together for Thanksgiving and Christmas and that sort of thing. So what I'm asking the board is to consider the resolution I had provided as a template to adopt for the county and see if we couldn't get that out there. And of course, if it is approved, I would go ahead and coordinate with the radio and newspaper and get those articles in there as well. Did you have an opportunity to review the attachments?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions on the attachments?
Mr. Chairman, may,
This isn't, it's just a proclamation, right? It's not
Is it a resolution or a proclamation?
proclamation, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I came up with a draft, but I didn't know if you had to sign or anything.
Do I have a motion to support the Green Light program for veterans in Kossuth County?
So moved.
I have a motion by Casey, second by Plath. Any discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimous.
And then Tammy, would it be okay to maybe see if maintenance could find a filter that we could put in the light here at the courthouse?
sure.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk to her and see.
I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing this to us.
Just, yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Good, good.
Next, we have Summit Carpet Solutions Project, motion to intervene. Who'd like to lead off on that?
It's your time.
Okay. On December 13th, the IUB will be hearing oral arguments to discuss the safety jurisdiction of Summit Pipeline. I encourage Kossuth County to file to intervene. The proceedings will be held to allow interested parties to provide input on the relationship between the findings the IUB must make in regard to the location of the proposed pipeline, local land use, and injury to property as compared to safety issues. If you file to intervene, your attorney will get to represent Kossuth County's ability to set safety standards in our county and have a say in the location of the pipeline if the IUB grants a permit for the pipeline. Local ordinances can set safety distances from residences, livestock, schools, hospitals, etc., and other requirements the local public and local officials deem necessary and important. Intervening is not arguing against the IUB. It's merely your opportunity to have a say in why you want a local ordinance. This is your only chance to make this argument directly to the members of the Iowa Utility Board. This is a chance to fight for the safety of your constituents. It seems it should be worth the cost of the legal fee to do so. It's unfortunate counties and landowners have been put in this position of having to spend time and money to fight something they didn't initiate or want. Anyone who wishes to participate in oral arguments should file briefs by November 10th. We have the option of hiring the same attorney that Shelby County has, that's Tim Whipple. And I don't know if you talked to Tim or
I
not.
did an opportunity to talk to him.
Okay,
but
all right.
It makes sense.
I called him, he wouldn't give me any information on costs, he said he could only give that to you.
Yeah, I can find that out, but it makes sense. But if November 10th is
I know, I
coming
know.
up,
Todd, your thoughts?
well, you know, I think that it's an opportunity for the county to present an argument in front of the utility board, as Ms. Erickson said. You know, and whether you want that to come from a united front, someone who's already spent a considerable amount of time on it, this Mr. Whipple, also makes sense if the county wants to go with it. I did speak with Doug a while back, and I don't know how involved this attorney is with Shelby County. I assume that he's the one that's helping with the ordinance also. The relationship between the ordinance and the zoning is quite intensive, and you know, given that there's this opportunity to somewhat join forces. Last time I was up here on this topic, the board had decided to wait to see what ISAC came out with as far as a survey. And I think the reason for that was it makes more sense to have more of a united front, more of a common argument, than have 99 individual arguments. That seems to me to be the best approach. If the board would want to go that route, I certainly can reach out to Mr. Whipple and Whipple.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Whipple to make that connection. Obviously, from that point on, you would be as a board, the client, and he would be able to communicate with you, but I certainly can make that contact. That would probably bridge the gap between the board of supervisors and the attorney, but it's up to you how you want to proceed.
I guess my concern is to hire an attorney, is it a blank check?
Well, you also have to look at it from the standpoint that he's already gone through most all of the motions to get to where Shelby County is now. So it really would not be as intensive for the attorney, in my opinion, but that I don't know. Those conversations, I can't speak on his behalf. I don't know how much it would cost. I don't believe it would be a blank check. Obviously, it would be for the efforts, the coordinated efforts towards what Kossuth County wants, which I assume is going to be, and this is an assumption, is going to be very similar in nature to what Shelby County wants.
It's gonna affect zoning. Doug, do you have any opinions on any of this?
This is all legal. You're talking about a motion to intervene, and I have no idea what that is.
No, and I was talking about the ordinance as far as the
Yeah.
connection between the
But-
ordinance and
I really have no idea what all that is.
Yeah, and that was talked about very extensively down at ISAC, the connection between the ordinance and zoning. And on October 14th, we got an email from ISAC with an update on the petition to intervene, and their executive board had met September 30th to review the results and discuss further board move forward with a petition to intervene related to the issue of eminent domain. And then it says, following a meeting with outside legal counsel during which concerns were raised with the eminent domain argument and high costs associated, the board met again on October 11th and rescinded the decision to intervene. So ISAC's not doing anything. Legally, they said they would push for legislative involvement instead, but if we don't have that as an option, it would be up to us to do anything on our own, and that could get expensive. I'd be concerned about that.
I say we do it. You know what I mean? Go with Mr. Whipple. I'll
Have
make that
you-
motion.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
I have a motion. Casey?
To what Nancy told us, the person's name and everything, what Nancy Erickson just relayed to us, I'll make the motion to go forward with that.
Have you talked to him
Floor?
for any dollar amount or anything like that? Have you talked to him at all?
Have you?
No, I haven't.
Matt, you know dollar amount?
No, that won't be, given to me.
You won't give it out to us.
You're gonna have to file for the motion to intervene and actually have Todd or the board chair communicate with him to get that information. And I guess if you make that motion, accept it, and then choose later, so you can rescind it, can't you, Todd?
Yeah, or you can, I mean, I can go downstairs and make the call and see if I have the opportunity to talk to him today, and maybe table it to Tuesday.
We won't have to do that.
Oh, you don't have, well, that's the election.
Election day.
That's, yeah, ten's the deadline, so if we go ahead and do it, and like Matt said, we could always back it out later if it's way bad for us.
But then do we need a dollar figure of not to exceed a
I
certain?
think we do for now, just, I mean, we can always raise it, I think, the dollar amount.
What do you have in mind?
I don't know. I'd say just go ahead and do it, and then find out what it's gonna cost, and then they can, like I said, if we think it's way too high,
But we can't make that decision. If we approve it, that decision would have to be made.
Then we have to have a board meeting to have that decision to put a limit on it, so I'd rather have you come up with an arbitrary figure.
Yeah,
what do you think for dollar amounts, you guys, the ones that were concerned with it?
Would it be all right if we postpone the decision until, see if Todd can make a connection with him?
Well, we have a November 10th.
Tenth deadline.
But you mean till later on in the meeting,
Yeah,
I think he's talking later on in
Oh,
the meeting.
sure.
Do you
I
think
can
you
run
could
down
try
there,
and right
if you
now?
wanna table it till later on in the meeting, I certainly can run down there and see if I can get a hold of him.
I think it'd be.
We have a motion on the floor though, so.
Do you wanna withdraw your motion until we?
I'll withdraw the motion until Todd gets dollar amount.
I think everybody'd be more comfortable with the dollar amount. I don't know.
At least you start opening our show.
Thanks, Todd.
I don't wanna write a blank check.
We will move this further on in our agenda. And anything else on the subject? Okay. Navigator pipeline project update.
Got a few handouts here, so bear with me.
And I might introduce myself while Lainey is getting some of those supplemental materials handed out. Let me disrespect those behind me, I'll try to turn around. My name is Elizabeth Burns Thompson. I work for Navigator CO2. I'm an Iowan, actually grew up on a farm in the eastern part of the state. So I come at this project through the lens of what actually it means for agriculture, and largely our rural processors, specifically the ethanol facility that you all have in the county. We've got Kirk here with the plant from Lakota, so if we've got specific questions about the facility, I may direct in his way, just because you are the subject matter expert. Lainey is handing out a bunch of information to you. I know some of you have maybe had the opportunity to see some of these materials already. All that's being handed out, just for your background, is publicly available. It's either part of our IUB application that we put forward on Tuesday of last week, or is already on the project, or has been, I should say, on our project website. So a number of materials. We've got the high-level county-wide map. Behind that is the individual kind of segments in a more distilled down fashion of the Kossuth County footprint. Again, that was in with Exhibit B, which was in our IUB filing early last week. So you can see a more distilled down perspective of the intended footprint in the county. Additionally, there is a packet, a bigger packet that's the IUB presentation. So that same slide deck that we utilized at each of the informational meetings that we did with landowners early on. And so that really gives a pretty broad-ranging update and overview about kind of the project, from the background about the team, the drivers of what's kind of stimulating this activity, environmental restoration type particulars, technical specific safety, things like that. We also know that we continue to get a lot of questions about kind of how this type of infrastructure compares to other pipelines, specifically as it relates to safety. So there's two other things that Landy continues to hand out here as it relates to safety. One of them is kind of an informational flyer of sorts that talks through specifically some of those safety parameters. The other thing is, I admit, going to be a little bit hard to read just because of the size of the text. And we can get you a more blown up version of this. I wanted to get you the exact version that was part of the IUB filings, and they put all that on one page. So that's why that chart is a little bit difficult to read. But what that, I think, does a very good thing to kind of showcase is it outlines kind of line by line what is within the PHMSA, so Part 195 stipulations. PHMSA being the federal regulator that has pretty much sole oversight over safety of pipeline infrastructure all across the country. CO2 falls within that scope, and so what we've done is broken down kind of line by line what that looks like, and then next to that specifically what we've gotten from a design and operational perspective under each of those stipulations where we plan to meet and in many cases exceed. I'm happy to, I don't do a whole lot of pretty structured presentations. I think the most benefit is probably dialogue and where you folks might have questions about where we're at in the process and things specifically hyper-local to the county. Again, we have about 15 miles of footprint here in Kossuth, with one of our shippers being obviously the plant there in Lakota. One unique thing I would say about Lakota that's probably different than than any of our plants across our footprint holistically is Lakota is actually one of the few that actually is capturing a portion of their CO2 currently and holding on site. That is being shipped exclusively by truck. Those trucks look very similar to kind of how we ship anhydrous, right? The bullet trucks of sorts, where it's both compressed as well as refrigerated. So it's staying in a liquid as it's moving up and down our roadways right now. What, at essence, we're looking to do with this infrastructure is allow that to continue to happen, but a much more efficient and in a safer fashion, right? Right now, all that stuff is moving down our roadways. There's going to continue to be a need for CO2 to be managed appropriately and properly, be it reducing how much gets released into the atmosphere, but additionally, we utilize CO2, as is the case of why plants are capturing some of it right now. Some of those benefits are in large industries that are important to many of us in the Midwest too. For example, livestock processing, specifically in the hog sector, right? They utilize a lot of CO2 as part of processing and other food and beverage type industry cases. So what we're looking at is again, building out a piece of infrastructure that provides that level of connectivity, very similar to the connectivity that we look for in natural gas, common carrier infrastructures, crude common carrier infrastructures, anything like that. We're looking at building out that type of connectedness just for kind of the next commodity that's coming to market. So with that, I'm happy to walk through any level of detail. I neglect one more thing I wanted to highlight, just in light of the conversation that was just had in relation to intervention and county zonings and who has scope over what. There is a lot of conversation about who does what and who has what role. I mentioned PHMSA, so the U.S. Department of Transportation has safety oversights over pretty much every means of transport, pipelines obviously being one of those. We also then have in Iowa the state siding entity being that housed within the Utilities Board. We absolutely recognize that there are, county level stipulations and concerns. We want to work collaboratively, with you if to try to address those concerns. So as you're looking through that chart, as it relates to kind of PHMSA oversight from a safety perspective, as you're looking through the stipulations that IUB looks like from a siting perspective, what we'd like to do is be able to sit down with you and say, is there something that from Kossuth County's perspective that is being missed there? And can we collaboratively look at a way of structuring that? We're open to that conversation. We don't want to be an us versus them type of mentality. We truly want to be good neighbors and partners. And so we want to kind of put out an olive branch to have that conversation before it has to go into, litigation or anything like that. So I know that's a lot of different tracks, and this is relatively new for a lot of folks, but know that we want to make sure that that's done in a collaborative fashion, at least from our project's perspective. So with that, I do also have a couple members from my team. Obviously, many of you know Laney. He's kind of my local eyes and ears because I can't be everywhere all of the time. Here with the plant, and a couple guys from our permitting and outreach teams that are working directly with landowners and doing some of the local level kind of siting permits as well. So with that, I have talked a lot. This is your meeting, so you let me know how you'd like to do kind of Q&A or what level of detail you'd like to hear more about.
Any questions?
Yeah, this damage prevention tape installed 2 foot above the pipeline.
Yep.
So you lay the pipe and then you put 2 foot of dirt on it and then you lay tape on top of it?
Yep, so think of damage prevention, it's kind of a fancy word for saying, those of us that are familiar with like caution tape, right? So think almost like police tape, caution tape, where we traditionally trench in the pipe. So this is gonna be a longer answer, where we bore it in or horizontal directional drill, we won't be able to put in the tape just because we're not disrupting above that, right? The only disruption zone would be where we put in the pipe. But everywhere where we would trench in the pipe, we'll put in that tape. So yeah, but the pipe is at least 5 foot, if not deeper. And then 2 feet above that, we'd effectively would lay in think like bright red caution tape that says warning pipeline below, stop digging, right?
Oh, it's not to prevent if you got a leak.
No, it is truly in instances that, someone doesn't call 811 and they're digging an area, the hope is that you'd encounter that as an alert before you'd encounter, the asset itself. It's one fail safe. There's a number of others that I'm happy to go through in more detail.
You're gonna go around all the tilers and all the contractors and let them know that that's there, so the average guy digging up, there's a red piece of plastic, what is it?
Right, and that's why on that we would mark, right, warning pipeline below,
Yeah,
right?
you tear up little chunks, you can't read it. So I mean, you're gonna go ahead of time, if this gets put in there, tell the contractors, if you see anything red, quit digging?
Yeah, so outreach in that perspective, we'll also have, similar to existing pipelines where you have the field markers, right, on field boundaries. Largely tile contractors should be calling 811. We know that's not always the case, but that would be something.
They're not always correct, 'cause I know
I
I did a tile
agree.
job and fiber optic got cut because they were like quite a ways off.
I agree, and that's in part why you can have all the bells and whistles on something, but having something physically in place as well as that human element is critically important. So the outreach directly to tile contractors is something that has not been brought up, but that's an incredible suggestion, and we can certainly push that out through the Drainage Improvement kind of association is probably a good place to start with that, in addition to maybe some of our EMS related outreach, just to make sure it's getting in the right hands. The other thing, I apologize for a long answer, but the other thing is part of that, you'll note on that, the handout that we talk about installing fiber as well. So we'll actually lay fiber on top of the pipe throughout the entirety of the footprint. So that fiber not only can listen for leaks, but it also can sense vibrations. So it should be able to sense when something is coming close to the pipeline long before it gets there anyway. So we have a very specific area where we know excavation is beginning to get close, right? So we can hopefully intervene before you get to a point where you would dig up the tape or interfere with the asset itself.
So in the 15 miles of Kossuth County, how many valves will that be? Is there an industry standard that says you have to have a valve in so many miles?
Yep. So and those are, so there is a baseline minimum that is outlined by PHMSA. I will say in many cases, we're going to exceed that in large part because there's a number of criteria outside of just spacings as part of that. So again, this is gonna be a little bit of a long answer, but the federal minimum is every 20 miles in areas that are not high consequence areas, and that is a specifically defined term by the feds. And in areas that are in a high consequence area, so think population centers, areas of gathering, things like that, that minimum spacing goes down to 7.5 miles. There are other triggers that also trigger a valve location. So edges of water bodies, edges of railroads, kind of key things like that. We're looking at the in addition to component pieces of that, which is why those dispersion models that you'll see notated and we talk about, right? Looking at what does dispersion at any one point along the pipe look like, and then we can go in and over engineer, right? That's where we look at putting valves closer together. So
Because the more valves, the safer it is, right?
well, so I think in some instances, yes. So this is an analogy that I utilize in a handful of places, but if you think about kind of driving a car, there's not one particular thing that makes driving that car safe, right? One seatbelt helps make you safe, but if you wore 17 of them, the factor of safety does not completely increase with every additional seatbelt. You also need to drive the speed limit. You also need to, right, there's a number of factors. So it's not just valves, no different than it's not just setback distances, right? We do need to adequately distance in areas, but that also looks different at different points along the line based on size, depth, right, the pressures, and the proximity that it is to what it's around, but in addition to, how it's engineered. The wall thickness, right? But valves is absolutely one piece of that pie, but it's not just, that is not the only thing that inadvertently makes it safe or not.
So the size of pipe, does that make a difference in the distance of the valve?
I don't believe so. Well, it will, because it will ultimately, the size of the pipe dictates how much product is actually in the pipe as well as the pressure at that particular point in time. So that would have a function of ultimately what a dispersion would look like, and so thus then the ultimate spacing that we would utilize in that area for the pipe. So there is not an easy way to say that de facto everywhere across that line that there would be a pipe every X distance, because frankly that would not be taking into account the unique kind of attributes of every inch or every mile of the landscape that we're crossing either. So again, not trying to make it a difficult answer, but it's trying to achieve the goal of safety is actually looking at it high, more local, not just a blanket application of the same thing everywhere.
How many PSI you're on?
It's got to be at least above 1,200 to stay in a liquid. It'll be anywhere between 1,300 and 2,100. We'll test it up to 27.5 and hold that for 8 hours with water long before we put any product in the line. There is, and I can add to this a little more. I apologize to keep pontificating. There's two ways you can change gas into a liquid from a CO2 perspective. Refrigeration, right? So super cooling it, or pressure. The way that you see it moving kind of on the roadways is a function of both. So they both refrigerate it to a certain factor as well as pressurizing it. We're opting for purely pressure because it allows us to move it at more of an ambient temperature. So you wouldn't have, swaths of cooling or warming going across the fields.
What's the temperature you're gonna keep it at?
Generally between about 40 and 80, I think, is what's indicated on the slides. It'll come out of the plant rather warm, about 100, but it does, normalize to ground temperature and that increased ground temperature, right? So, or increased burial depth. So we're not at surface. We're 5, 6, 8 feet below grade in many cases.
I've talked to Lainey quite a bit. Can you talk about this NAV 911? Is that like a automated text system, or how will that potentially work?
Yep. So we envision it to be somewhat similar to kind of the Amber Alerts or severe weather alerts that we get. Initially, that would be kind of auto-programmed or auto-loaded with all of the requisite EMS folks that would be part of both the footprint as well as, many of us have mutual aid, right? We've got 2080 agreements with neighboring counties, neighboring communities, maybe regional hazmat units of sorts. And so all of those individuals would be programmed in that system. And if there was an abnormality in the system, it would automatically send that notice out to that group of individuals. That would then be followed up by someone from our operations center to say, hey, we responded and this is what we were able to determine. It helps make that more efficient of a notification.
How many easements do you have already in Kossuth County? Do you have a percentage?
We are still pretty early, so I understand that is the question that everybody wants. We did just get started. Remind me, it's been 3 months.
3 months.
3 months on out. So, fortunately / unfortunately, we are just getting started. We have begun to sign folks, but we realized that we did this over top, but we started this right on top of harvest. And so when you think about, you're crossing predominantly ag land, this is one of the busiest times of year for folks. So we're just kind of getting started. So the numbers are relatively low. We all start at 0. We're no longer at 0, I can tell you that. But it's a slow churn. As with anything with agriculture landowners, right? Many folks want to get to know who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it long before they want to talk about the specifics of dollars and cents and easements. And so we're working on that right now, building those relationships. But everyone should have seen, even if we haven't been able to sit down across the table from someone just yet, we are mailing out the kind of packets of information that include that draft easement language, as well as kind of a rough mock-up of an offer that's kind of a starting point for those negotiations. So our goal was to at least have something in everyone's hands by the end of, well, now is November 1st. The goal was the end of last month, and I think we're darn near close to that.
So what number is it?
What do you mean? What the percentage is? I honestly don't have that off the top of my head right now. And it's we actually look at these more from a construction spread is how we're evaluating. So when our teams are doing this, we're looking at it from about 100 to 120 mile segments at a time. So we just kind of that functionality of breaking down from a county by county versus a construction spread, because the construction spreads are actually how we're breaking down our resources and our teams internally. So we're working to figure out how to structure that reporting so that I have county numbers, as opposed to spread 5 has X percentage, because that doesn't mean a whole lot in this county compared to Emmett, compared to others, right?
You don't start at your source and go one way or the other?
In terms of?
Well, to me, you'd start at where you're gonna dump it in Illinois and work north.
No, so it's a kind of you take 100 or 1,300 miles and you break it up into about 10 different segments or so, and then you kind of replicate. You have a restoration crew or a land clearing crew at all of those. You have a construction crew at all of those. So it allows you to kind of break it down and effectively construct the whole thing simultaneously in a shorter window of time. We think that also allows for a little bit more local influence or local participation in the project as well, right? If that crew is only accountable for that 120 miles, you're more likely to get folks that live and operate in that area too, because they're able to go home at night, right? They're not having to come up from, one part of the state and work another part of the state or another, part of the country. In large part, you can pull from the employment base there, because they're a little bit more local in terms of their focus.
Yeah, that don't make sense.
What do you mean?
So you start, okay, here's Illinois, here's where the end of the line is, so you're starting over here and you're going this way. So you're getting property, paying all the money, then all of a sudden you got 4 miles here, nobody signs. You're done. If the eminent domain don't come.
No,
how do you get through them?
it's not a segmented approach like that. Sorry, I answered your question from a construction perspective. From an easement and outreach perspective, it is talking to everyone across the entire footprint all of the time. There is not a start it here and work our way out. We're working with everyone all the time across the entirety of that footprint.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you've been in the country, I hear about you.
Me personally? Oh, yes.
Land
yes.
agents are out, I
Yep.
do hear that.
Yep.
Any other questions for the Navigator pipeline?
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yes, absolutely. If you have additional concerns or question, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll look to bring again some of our technical folks, some of our engineers again up here the early part of next year and do some of that robust EMS outreach and training as well the early part of 2023 as well. So
keep in mind that we have more tile in Kossuth County than just about anywhere else in the world.
Yep.
So you're gonna have to deal with an awful lot of tile lines.
So, and I apologize to belabor this point too, but I think it's important to note that, while landowners, and I'm fully aware of that, right? Like I come at this from an ag background. I absolutely understand. When a landowner gets a map from us, there are many places where they do see it cross from maybe corner to corner across a 40. When we're routing this, the technology and the way that we're looking at it is I won't say blind, but we're not taking into account, right, who a landowner is or who they are not, or making sure we're avoiding X person or that person. We're truly looking at it from what is the safest routing perspective, and how do you then minimize the impact as part of that. Now, what that might mean is if, this is figuratively, but say, this is my 40 and it's proposed to cross across. Well, if there's a house here and I've got a machine shed here, but there's tile that run, well, it actually would run to a main, right? If you would prefer for us to follow a field boundary, that's absolutely something that we can take into account and have conversations about. However, we felt from a safety perspective, that's a delineation or decision that you as a landowner should make that value judgment, right? It's not on us to be able to say, well, we should route it down here because this is a barn and this is a house, and that type of delineation. You as a landowner, those local folks, we felt that that's the most appropriate way to go about that. So to say that a line on the map is an absolute done deal, I think is maybe an overstatement. We are absolutely open to conversations, but that's a perfect instance where, if a landowner would like us to avoid impacts to tile, we can certainly do that in places, but from a routing perspective, that may put us closer to X facility or Y, and that's a decision that we felt was most appropriate for them to make, not us, the company.
Yeah, but you're gonna run into some farms that have tile at 40 feet, 50 feet.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a nightmare for you to cut through all those.
Yep.
You gonna trench it? You're not gonna pull it, are you?
We intend to trench a majority of it, yep.
I mean, you find broken tile?
And I think another thing that's important to know, from a restoration perspective of that, we can certainly do all of those repairs and work with that landowner. Sometimes the best person to go and fix that tile is the person that probably put it in to begin with, and that allows us to also help stimulate the local base as well. So if that's a pathway, that a landowner would prefer to go about, we want to have flexibility in the model to make sure that they're comfortable with who's doing the work in addition to how the work is done.
You're gonna have a head contractor like the other one was having somebody from out of, I believe it's Minnesota, they're gonna oversee our tilers.
Yep.
You guys doing the same thing?
We are working to build it to bring in kind of a local subject, kind of a tile expert, right? Because the folks that know how to weld and string pipe are not generally the ones that know kind of soil restoration, nor do they know how tile systems work. And so I think that's also a key lesson learned of just the construction industry overall, that having a main pipeline contractor being in charge of everything is maybe not the best way to go about it. So that's also something that we're changing in our model, right? We're gonna contract directly with those that'll do the construction. We're also gonna direct contract with the restoration so that we have a better day-to-day oversight and scope over those individuals that are doing that restoration work. But yes, we'll have kind of pipeline experts. I'm not sure I think we're utilizing a different firm than Ellenson that Summit has retained. But I think at the end of the day, the foundation goal from our perspective is that we understand how important tile is, and you know your tile better than we do, and luckily you and your tile contractor probably know it better than we do. So if that can be a local level perspective, then yes, let's absolutely do that.
So I know the job a year ago that the fly-by-night came out of Des Moines and fixed the tile, and they had it all screwed up. So to me, you gotta have a local boy, because he lives here, his name's on here, and his business is in jeopardy. So to me, forget the out-of-staters, and get the ones that are in Kossuth County or right around Kossuth County that do tile and do your fixing, because their name's on it.
And that's, I couldn't agree more, and that's why we wanted to make sure we've got flexibility in how we are going about this proposal so that folks can be comfortable with who they're doing business with. And frankly, from a local economic stimulate makes a lot of sense that way too.
Yeah, we had one contractor that drilled through a 24-inch tile for me a couple years ago. He said, well, it didn't shoot water out. He couldn't figure out that it was draining instead of, he thought it was a pressure line that fed a water tower.
Yes.
Some contractors have no concept of time.
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions? If not, thank you much.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah. Go ahead. We're gonna take a minute break here. Yeah, just a minute, we gotta go, Todd, did you get an answer? Then we'll go back.
The navigator doesn't want to restore the land.
Still can't leave it all at home, we'll see us killed.
Well, I think CO2 out here, you know. Go back to 150.
Yeah. You don't want 230 thing, sure. Get your tillage all done?
What's that?
Get your tillage all done?
Yeah. Started.
Boy, that stock's really nice this year. I hate to have a drought, but boy, it's nice.
Well, everything was too easy.
Ground's hard. You sit in that tractor and just rocks this thing. Is yours gummy up there?
Bowling ground.
I didn't know if you had the clumps and it's. Yeah.
I thought the DMI did a terrible job this year. Didn't boil anything, and they just kind of rooted holes in the ground. Tiffin did a lot better.
Well, my district rented on GPS on 3 inches longer, but I didn't get stuff on.
I think ours was.
Yeah, typically, I know, DMI's are too pretty. They got automatic reset, they got short stop. What's the purpose? You don't need to share both, you have to automatic reset.
I don't like to
You're good.
A lot of them, a lot of tickets out there.
So we're definitely, there's a crossover. Looks like probably just about, yeah. We'll have, I those types of things. It's just that the more we have like the specific issues outlined, another we wouldn't have had anything with any above ground infrastructure yet, so we wouldn't have like, yeah, you wouldn't, there's a map that's got, like, you would have a box that says this is a valve, or this is a booster station, or this is a launcher receiver station, right? Because that's another thing that, those are probably the three potential terminals down the road. Those are people who want to know about above ground infrastructure, those locations are not delineated just yet. The other thing is, it does show that. They are. The pipe of use, so yeah, the 6 inches, so it is 6 inch all through Kossuth.
Oh. We're out in the covered, so we have to get some. Yep.
Come on, Jack, back, Todd, you got
It's just over 70 tracks, we just have 50 there.
Oh.
So it's like, 11 per track.
Let's go back into session.
Employee and family resources.
We're back in session. Todd, you have an answer for us?
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Whipple, and he had indicated that currently he represents Shelby County, as we know, for both motion to intervene and also preparing the ordinance. He also represents, and I mean, I wrote these down somewhat in haste, but as I understand it, Palo Alto, Montgomery, Harrison, Butler, and Bremer for the ordinance. And I think if I also understood him correctly, Palo Alto is thinking about the motion to intervene. And his position was that if more counties do the motion to intervene, then the costs will be reduced, will be lowered. Obviously, they would split the cost. There's also Hardin and Wright County, I think their county attorney is doing the motion to intervene, but they're joining forces on that. So he already represents several counties, and so, he's familiar with it. And, he had indicated that Shelby County, and his thought process was that if he budgeted $100,000 for the process, that should be sufficient, that it'll probably be less if more of these counties join on. That's what Shelby County did. So looking at it from the standpoint of additional funding, he said there's possibly federal funds available in ARPA, whatever, to assist in those types of payments, but that's what he suggested. And interestingly enough, he asked if we had both Navigator and Carbon Summit come through, and I said we did, and he wanted to know if you're interested in that for Navigator too.
I would assume if you did one, you do the other.
And he indicated that, and maybe some of the representatives here that can answer to this, but he said the motion to intervene may be sooner with Navigator because they filed an application or the permit process.
Recently, yeah.
And then they filed a motion to waive the 6-week inspection to 3 weeks. And he said that that's going to put a tremendous burden on inspectors to get that done in a 3-week period. So he said it may be something that even though the process is going to be down the road further than Carbon Summit, the legal issues may be sooner than Carbon Summit.
Roger, you want Elizabeth to say something?
I'm happy to provide a little color on that if so granted. Yeah, so we did, hold on my chair. We did include as part of our permit application, unfortunately they call it a waiver. We're not asking to waive the restoration standards. What we're asking for is a clarification to achieve those goals just a little bit differently. And one of those is a timeline on the soil surveys. So as part, there's really 2 buckets. So one of them is topsoil surveys. You're required to do a survey on, assume this table is the right of way. You're required to do a survey on the far edge, far left side, and the far right side, and then immediately in the center where it's being disrupted. Every 500 feet. And not only every 500 feet, but then you also have to have 2 per parcel. What we're saying is that soil sampling on the edge of a right-of-way where we have not done any disruption prior to doesn't give a representative sample. If you survey or if you do those samples in the center, 2 in the center of that, you actually get a representative sample of that entire area more accurately than doing it the 2 on the edge and having the 1 in the middle that's more impactful of the land actually impacted or the easement area. What we also then said is within that area, that 500 feet, we still want to do every 500 feet. There are areas where we don't have, we cross a very significantly small section or a quarter, or that's actually technical terms, of an edge of either a quarter or a section, right? Such that you couldn't, you really almost couldn't get 2 full segments or 2 cross sections. They call those soil survey cross sections within that parcel. So where we would have contiguous parcels under similar landowners, if there was a small edge of one field and then a larger of another, that they would look at those contiguously, and we do 2 within those collectively, as opposed to 2 in a very small piece and then 2 in a very large, maybe 40, right? So looking at that in a bigger picture. On the survey, the soil survey timeline, what the code outlines is 6 weeks from when those surveys are taken. That then the county and landowners have 6 weeks to review those or evaluate before we can commence construction. What we're looking at is a pretty tight turnaround in terms of timelines. We also think that with the turnaround of information, that 3 weeks may actually be a bit more reasonable to allow for review to ensure that we're still capturing weather windows to move forward with survey. Now, obviously that's just a proposal subject to kind of IUB oversight. you know, and that would only be subject to if we get to a point in the timeline where we would need to look a little bit quicker at those soil surveys. We're not looking at trying to negate requirements. It's more or less how do you reach those goals in actually a way that's more efficient. So we don't see that escalate, increasing the timeline from an intervention perspective. We actually are quite a few months behind, different timeline I should say than Summit, in that we just filed last week. They filed their materials many months ago. So we don't have, neither company has really a timeline at this point that IUB has outlined for hearings and things like that. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and I should have brought that up in my comments before about the stipulations of that waiver that was part of it. So happy to answer questions
Which
as well.
is the point, I think, that IUB is going to be making the decision whether they cut it from 6 weeks to 3 weeks. And that's, you know, an opportunity to argue against that shortening of that time period. Yeah, and looking at it from the standpoint, he said, you know, that's what he would suggest budget. You know, when you're looking at attorney fees, you know, regardless of what the issue is, and we always get criticized for giving the answer, it depends. It depends on what's unknown. You know, if there's a lot of litigation that ensues after, you know, the motion intervene or after the ordinance is drafted and put in place and all of those things, obviously that increases the price. But, you know, he was safe, he felt that that was a safe number to suggest. And that if more counties come in and join him, then it would be more of a cost-sharing type of approach and be less.
So there's about 7, 8 counties that he's already representing that more likely are gonna do the intervention. If these are.
I wrote down 6.
6?
Only one so far has made the decision. I think these others are determining whether they want to also have him do the motion intervene. The counties named, though, were for the ordinance, certainly.
It's WIPPLE for the record.
I think it's WHIPPLE.
WHI, okay.
So does that cover both then, or that's just
Covers
one?
both the ordinance and the intervention.
Does that cover both pipelines?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I caution you, because it could be more than that, but you would certainly have an understanding at that point in time whether or not the cost is getting to the point where the county's deciding maybe it's too much. But that would be kind of like if you go in and hire an attorney for litigation, usually you have to put down a retainer. Now, you're not putting that money down as a retainer, but you're setting it aside for those types of expenses that come in. So it's analogous to, but only faintly, so.
I'm gonna say we don't have that much in the budget for attorney fees in the supervisor's fund. So your suggestion, if we put give him $100,000 limit, we'll have to do a budget amendment, find it somewhere else.
When's this all gonna be done?
Excuse me, his thought was that there's a little bit of uncertainty as far as time frame, but he thinks certainly by the end of the year, you know, you should have your ordinance in place. The motion to intervene is gonna obviously happen at the IUB's schedule, so that would probably happen sooner. I'm not sure, Nancy, did you have the date as far as the hearing that's set, or is there a hearing set for
The
the
hearing is set for December 13th.
Okay, so, you know, obviously that would be here within the month of November. You know, his concern is they're going to start, there was also a proposal, or not a proposal, that the IUB was wanting to get procedures down, get conferences set, which then necessary parties to that are notified. And so once that order's in place, it kind of sets a hearing. And not to say that you couldn't intervene after that, but it may be a little bit more difficult.
No, you said, is Hancock on there?
No, not at this point in time. Palo Alto.
Right.
So if we do a motion to intervene,
Yes,
do we have?
right is being done by they did the motion to intervene, and Hardin did the motion to intervene, I think they did it with their county attorney. But they're joining forces, he's reaching out to them and working together in that.
Because if we, they'll do our ordinance and intervene, but we have a different ordinance because we changed the numbers, the setbacks.
Well, yeah, and he would do the ordinance according to
What we want.
what you want.
We
The
haven't changed
ordinance
that yet.
form, he prepared, as I understand it, the Shelby County ordinance, which I think is in its like fourth or fifth draft. Looking at it from the standpoint of building from that, obviously you would just change whatever the county, Kossuth County wants in those, situations. Also, you have to look at the zoning ordinance, so it's a comprehensive plan, is that what it's called, Doug? The comprehensive plan, and how that relates to the setbacks and the specifics that Kossuth County wants in its ordinance. And that would be obviously dependent upon each county's comprehensive plan and what they want to have as far as protection for the health, safety, and welfare of their citizens.
So I know the proposal I put out there, Roger seconded me, that setbacks, I know 2 other counties that are pretty much gonna back us. So we'd have 3 across of the adjoining with our setbacks. Otherwise, if we don't go with Whipple, can you do all that?
You know, about 80% of my job is prosecuting criminals in Kossuth County. To throw something in that I'm completely blind on, to be honest with you, it would be a task. Not saying I can't do it, I always like a challenge, but looking at it from the standpoint of taking me away from what primarily I'm elected to do, would be, would really throw a little bit of a wrench in my office. Looking at that, I don't know, we just don't have the staff and manpower to take on a project this big, I'll be honest with you. Like I said, I'll do whatever the board wants. There may be it may be a little difficult.
I'm glad, Jonas, that you said you can't handle it. I'd make the motion again that we hire Whipple to do the ordinance and the setback.
I got a question for Todd, yeah. So Todd, say we decide to go with this and do the ordinance and we intervene, and just like the ATV ordinance, can't the state come out with their ordinance and supersede ours?
And I had a brief discussion with Mr. Whipple about that too. And in order to avoid that potential preemption, you want to be in the process as early as you can. That is a possibility, but there's no guarantees. I think looking at it from the standpoint of what Mr. Stecker had indicated as far as ISAC, they're wanting to promote and push towards legislative action. That could come this year, could come 5 years down the road. The ATV ordinance issue, how long were we dealing with that before the state stepped in?
5 years.
Yeah, so, you're dealing with a different time schedule down there, but that is a possibility.
Essentially, if you fail to file the motion to intervene, you have no voice with the IUP, correct?
Correct. You're not considered a necessary party to the argument. I think you can probably go down there and I'm sure they have a discussion period or whatever, but I think being involved in that process provides more clout.
Matt, is that pipeline size too, or Todd?
Excuse me?
The pipeline size, I mean, these are things that we would have no say on if they decide to change, if we don't intervene.
That I don't know, Rich. I'm not sure as far as the size. I think that possibly could be an issue.
Because we don't have that much in our budget.
And I don't know if there are any funds other than taxpayer dollars, ARPA.
We got that pretty well spoken for ARPA.
Okay.
Well, and I mean, Elizabeth mentioned it before, I've talked to Laney several times and stuff, and they're trying to work with us without the legal process being the backbone, so I don't,
Can I speak? Okay.
I think that we could do a motion to intervene and give the hiring Whipple a little bit of thought before we jump in, and not many other counties are gonna get involved in it.
It's gotta be done by then.
I don't know.
We have to have another meeting, but. Mr.
Todd, would
Chairman,
you-
Rich, you would like to
Yeah.
speak?
Thank you. Little history, I just live south of town, and I'm on the secondary route, but I'm a picture guy. I got 9 patents, and everything I see is usually pictures, and I understand it, but we'll go back to our 8-inch pipe here. This was the experimental in Europe. And I got to checking, and you take a pipe, this happens to be a 5-inch, I didn't find an 8, but you double it, and it's 4 times the volume. And we would have no say, and correct me if I misspeak, if we don't intervene, if we don't have a part of this thing, they could eventually dictate to us these types of things. And can you imagine, 4 times what that picture was? I can't, because we live pretty close. Matt's lives very close, he's got kids. I got my granddaughter I was playing with. And I'm sitting there going, what are we doing? What are we doing to allow something? We got 4 minutes. I wear a CPAP at night. I don't even hear anything. I wouldn't make it. My mother-in-law's next door. 14 minutes would be a fast time for her. We can't start a vehicle. And, if you have kids, don't you care? Don't you care about our community? I mean, I know half the people in this room are all cut from the same cloth. And so I know we're talking about money and this and that, but what is this worth to us to stand up? And I think we need to do it. And, I keep hearing, it's 55%. Well, no, you only use 2/3. The other third is distillers. Doggone it. Let's just call it for what it is and see it for what it is. And let's show some guts and courage and go forward. And if it's money here, let's find it. Let's at least position ourselves to represent ourselves. And I think that's what we're asking for.
You're basically asking that it not happen ever.
Well, let's at least give ourselves a fighting chance. When they come back and we have no say, that's the worst part of it, is that, you did intervene, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, but let's at least be in the game. And I really feel it's important that it's not $1 million, it's 100,000, it's money, but geez, how do you put a price tag? The 2 developments next to me, I can count 400 people, 500 people quickly, families, this, that. We all know they're hurrying up before the PHMSA changes so they can sneak this stuff in. I mean, do you even care? And who does something like that? Who endangers people? And with all due respect, you talk about a truck, a bullet truck, you got a 20-mile pipe that's got 2,000 PSI. If a truck overturns a half a mile away, it's a little different than if a pipeline like this goes. And you got, 15 miles? You got to shut down in order to shut down the valve, you got to shut off the compressors, this and that. It's game over. And I think we just need to see it for what it is. And I think this gives us the opportunity going forward to at least be in the game. And I think if we don't do it, we don't make the deadlines, we don't do what we're going to do, then we're going to have to live with this. We got AirMed that goes over a place, a record three in one day. I think the guy said 3 or 4, I'll go with 3. That's our healthcare. They won't be able to take off. They found it can drift maybe up to 4 miles, our hospitals, our schools. I think we need to be at least on the forefront and say, you know what, we're gonna be in the game just in case. And I think if we don't intervene, we're giving it up. And I think that's just too much.
If I might, I think there's one thing I wanted to clarify, that on PHMSA, that we're somehow trying to get in to be grandfathered in, that is not the case. That may be for like building codes, right, that your electrical, you're fine unless you try to pull a permit. That is not the case with pipelines. If and when there are any updates to how PHMSA regulates from a federal perspective, we are required to update that line. So there is no grandfathering in, there is no, as long as we get in at a certain point that we exist under a different set of rules, we have to bring it up to, if the rules change from a safety perspective, we are required to bring that.
So you're gonna tear up the pipeline that you just put in and put in a new one to meet safety rules?
any operational perspective, however they would, if any change how we operate, yes, that you would have to go in and make those necessary updates. That happens right now with natural
You're
gas
gonna
infrastructure.
Pay us for that again?
Yeah, we are responsible for the maintenance and operation. That's the
You're gonna
case.
pay us for tearing up our land again?
Sorry, I want to be cognizant of intervening in the process. Yes, but that's part of the permitting process, and part of those easements is we are required to make landowners whole.
You didn't answer a question.
Yes, I'm from the entirety. So it's not just during construction, it's during maintenance. If there's anything that happens that we need to go in and do repairs to that line or make a necessary upgrade, yes, we are required to make you as a landowner whole on any type of impacts required for that, and that exists right now in any infrastructure. This is also similar to older like natural gas lines. They weren't historically piggable, so pipeline inspection tools. That was a requirement that came out from PHMSA, that you had to bring your systems up to date so that those inspection tools could move through. That required a level of updates. That now happens today, and so that's an example that has taken place in other infrastructure to date. Just a point I wanted to clarify.
It doesn't
Apologies
sound
for
right, I'm
interrupting.
sorry, it still doesn't sound right, it doesn't sound right.
Well, there was a comment made about the size of the pipe, and I don't know that we would have anything that we could do about that, no matter if we intervene or not. I don't think we could change that at all.
But that affects how much gas is dispersed. The size of the pipe does.
Yeah, but intervening, I don't think we could even bring that up as a topic. I mean, we can't change that. I don't feel that'd be something we could even talk about there.
Ultimately, if you fail to intervene, you're at the backseat of the decision of whatever the IUB decides.
So we have a motion on the floor without a second. Your motion still stands, Mr. Casey, that you want to hire Whipple to be the attorney and file a motion to intervene.
And the ordinance too.
And the ordinance? You want him to review our ordinance or?
If we're gonna pay them, you get both at the same dollar, right, John?
Well, you can, yeah, I mean, you can have them just do one or the other or both. I mean, that doesn't change
But
the,
it's the same money, right? And you said you don't have time, it'd be really hard for you to do it, so yeah, I say do both.
Everybody understand the motion? Do I have a second to Mr. Casey's motion?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Loss. Any discussion? More than what we had already?
I guess I wouldn't be opposed to filing the motion to intervene, having Todd do that and doing some more research into the attorney and costs and stuff, but I'm not comfortable with it with what I know right now.
But did you say you just said that you didn't have time?
well, here's the thing. I mean, you know, the litigation, legal action, any of those types of actions build on the process. I mean, the initial process, obviously Hardin County and Wright County, they have filed a motion to intervene, and the county attorney did that. The ordinance, then you go from that to, okay, you have the oral argument or the argument in front of the IUB, and then any type of additional action that happens with the IUB if that requires additional time. You know, looking at it from the standpoint of any of these counties, including Hardin and Wright, could join forces too, even though the county attorney started it down there in those two counties. You know, so at least with the filing of the motion to intervene, you would get your place at the table, so to speak. You know, then as far as the arguments in front of the IUB, I'm sure they're going to be very similar, and I'm sure there would be conjoined effort in trying to make some, or at least the arguments would be similar, and the efforts then, because they're similar, would be conjoined. So I don't necessarily think that the motion to intervene itself is the great amount of time involved in this. The great amount of time involved in this is formulating the arguments based upon the information in each county. And then from that point, I'm not really sure with the IUB where that's going to go after the initial presentation of the arguments from each county, whether that's going to involve additional potential litigation, additional time in front of the IUB, additional briefs, additional motions. You know, that additional work after the motion to intervene is the uncertainty. And at that point in time, though, at least you have your place at the table, as I mentioned before. If something then looks like this is going to be more involved, certainly, we can then at that point request Mr. Whipple to come in. If you want to. Like I said, I'll do what the board wants, and I will get it done no matter what. I'm just saying it's you know, there's only 5 of us in the office downstairs, and so, you know, it's, we can't shirk our other duties to the county as far as public safety. But, you know, there's 24 hours in a day, and I tend to use most of them. So, whatever the board wants. If you want me to do the motion to intervene, I'll do the motion to intervene. If, you know, at that point in time, you make a decision, or at least gives you enough time to consider the expense that it would be to go with an outside attorney, who obviously is educated in this subject. You know, that's something that you certainly can do. I can do it if the board wants me to.
Dan, is your motion for both pipelines or just for some?
Kossuth County, so both.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you guys vote on this, I just wanna make this, you guys, the 5 of you represent the entire county, and picture yourself with this thing going right through your backyard without voice.
Any other discussion?
I could make one statement quick, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, I mean, in the next couple of months, the county's gonna be reviewing and adopting a new budget for the coming year, so, I mean, I don't think anybody along the pipeline route is gonna be opposed to their tax money going to, you know, protecting them and having a voice down there. So we can always look at that in the future.
I would make a motion as well, but I don't know if you wanna handle this one first, or.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Sorry, I got it wrote down here. I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any more discussion? Do a roll call vote, please.
Stecker,
I would say no for the current motion.
Casey,
Yes.
Loss,
Yes.
Platt,
Yes.
Jerks.
Yes. Motion carried 4-1. Anything else?
So I will make contact with Mr. Whipple, the process now, obviously you made the motion, that doesn't necessarily guarantee, all right? And more than likely, there's not going to be a problem, but every attorney, when they hire a new client, has to do a conflict check. And so, you know, in my discussions, it didn't sound like there was going to be any potential conflict, none that he knows of, but obviously he's in a large firm in Des Moines, and so they'll have to run through the conflict check. You then send a letter of representation, so that, or an engagement letter, so that, you know, it can be in contract form, so it outline all of the cost, expenses, and what you can expect from his representation. He'll probably want to have a point of contact. Would it be you, Mr. Jarks, that you would contact, or?
Yes. I think we should have a proposal.
Yeah, so I would recommend, once we get to that point where he has the engagement letter in your hands, then probably put it on the agenda at that point in time, so that you can, you know, you can discuss and ask the questions of him, and you can get it from actually him as opposed to through me.
Have him send it to the auditor and copy me on it, and then we'll.
Certainly. More than likely, it'll be in the email. I mean, most everything now is email, so it saves time. But I'll talk to him when I get downstairs.
So will all that be accomplished then in the time frame? Cause didn't you say that was the 10th? Whatever the date
Yeah, I
is.
mean, you made the motion to
So he
approve
will-
representation. So once the email comes up, or I assumed it would be email, once you get the engagement letter, then that'll outline, the expectations. I think at that point in time, you have, since you've approved his hiring, the ability to tell him to go forward with the motion to intervene, which could happen as early as the end of this week. I mean, a motion to intervene is more than likely, something that he can do relatively quickly, but will not do until the engagement letter is signed. And maybe that's a little more, optimistic. It could certainly be by the end of next week.
But it can't, it has to be done by the 10th though.
So do we need a full board meeting to sign that engagement letter?
Well, I presume that you've hired him, and all the engagement letter will do is explain, his hourly fee, what expenses are going to be billed to the county, what expenses they may advance, in looking at it from the standpoint of potential costs, litigation costs, those types of things, and then how billing will happen. Usually it's on a monthly time frame. So, yeah, I mean, that's all that more than likely the engagement letter will have in it. So I don't see that would be a problem, given your motion today to have that signed. Obviously, that's something that is uncertain, because I'll tell them to also include me so I can kind of review it. But as far as going forward, I don't think that would be necessarily a hindrance.
You made the motion to intervene, so I think you're going to intervene.
Well, I was just asking the question because you had said that, whatever letter, whatever, would be our opportunity to ask some of those questions.
And here's the other suggestion that I would have for the board. Okay, once I make contact with him, then he's going to be able to talk to any one of you, and you can ask those questions of him directly. I think that's more appropriate, so you can educate yourself as far as what his intentions are, whether the deadline's November 10th or not. All of those things can be ironed out individually. I think you would feel comfortable doing that. Otherwise, obviously, because litigation, which the motion to intervene would be considered, would be protected under a closed meeting. So you would have those meetings with your attorney in closed session. But as far as those questions is the deadline November 10th, or how soon do we have to have this done? Those types of things, I think individually you feel comfortable talking to you. Again, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. I didn't discuss that with him. But as an attorney, I think that would represent the board. I think, individual questions are capable of being answered independently.
With that, do you want to take a 15-minute break?
Can I ask one clarifying question on,
Yep.
just as it relates to ordinances, again, I can't speak on behalf of Summit, but I know from a navigator perspective, we do want to work collaboratively through an ordinance process and also be cognizant of minimizing costs of the county. So however you would like that process to work, we can certainly work through Mr. Whipple on that. If you'd like us to work directly with staff and the county or you as board members, again, we want to be cognizant of cost of impact, so we want to minimize those where possible. So if we can do that directly with county, we're certainly willing to have those conversations and work through kind of that conversation. I just want to be cognizant of process. So, and maybe that's a further conversation later down the road, but just would ask that you let us know who you'd like us to have as a point of contact to begin those conversations.
We will do that.
Okay,
Do you have any cards?
I do, yep,
So you can get
yep,
all of it?
I'll drop one off to everybody there.
Just want to take a break for drainage.
Doug's ready here, you wanna do that first?
Yeah, this is
It's up to the board.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I saw Don Reefer around.
Doug, you ready? As long as you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you to all involved this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, good morning again.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay,
First thing, we got non-discrimination assurance.
correct, yeah. Title VI, non-discrimination assurance and agreement. Title VI was a part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. When we receive federal funds, we are required to not discriminate. So whenever we design projects, the road department designs projects, purchases road right of way, lets a project, hires consultant engineers, we have an obligation not to discriminate. And I think in 2013, this was brought up and we completed some agreements. Again, in 2000, I believe it was 18, 2017, we completed some information. Now, I just want to bring us up to date. I included in your information the non-discrimination agreement, the non-discrimination policy statement, and all the assurances. They're all dated November 1 of 2022, and I'd just like to get us up to date. With the swap projects where the ability for the state to spend money on our projects and keep all the federal funds, we were able to not concentrate on this as much, but now we are back to where we're spending federal dollars on the local level. The agreement has Roger being the chair of supervisors. He's in charge of the agency. Designated one Title VI coordinator is myself, and it talks about the organization obligations. Then we also have the right part of it. Excuse me here. We also have that part of the policy statement. They're on our website, both of those, and then the associated non-discrimination assurances. So I'd ask the board to go ahead and approve these.
I have a motion to approve the non-discrimination policy. Motion by Platt, do I have a second? Second by Loss. Any discussion on the agreement? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
I'll go ahead and just bring all the information you have signed, Roger, if that's all right. Move to request for work in the road right of way. There's information in your electronic file, or electronic folder, excuse me. Last week we were contacted by Kerry Maston, who is an operator up in the north end, landowner up in the north end of Kossuth County. He and his neighbor, Russ Huber, are putting in a tile. They need to go through 240th Avenue. We have everything. The road department has everything that they need in order to comply with the policy. Mr. Maston has provided all of that. And we actually gave Mr. Maston verbal to go ahead and go through the road. We're in the process of delivering material to him. So I would recommend to the board that they would approve of this request.
Do I have a motion to approve construction in the right of way? makes a motion, I'll second the motion. Any discussion on the crossing in Hebron Township? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0.
And then we have a request from Interstate Power and Light. They are removing, this is in section 17 of Prairie. Again, this is in your folder. This is in St. Benedict. They are going to be removing a overhead line from the road right away to a home and replacing that and going underground. So they'll be working just a little bit in our road right away. And again, I would recommend approval of this request.
Mr. Casey makes a motion, Mr. Lost makes a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0.
All right, that is all the construction.
Thank you. Just one on this one?
Just one, yeah. All right. Discussion, the Irvington Bridge, I was down there last week. They do have more people working on that. They are planning to pour it prior to Thanksgiving. We're kind of thinking, there's a calendar. We're kind of thinking the 15th is when they're gonna be looking, the 15th or the 16th, so in 2 weeks. They get that taken care of. That should be open, first week in December, when snow falls.
I was gonna say, I told you snowball's gonna get hit.
Four-way bridge, that is, actually, we've taken down the snow fence there. People are going across. We still have a little bit of construction on that. But shortly, we should have everything opened up, I'd say the end of this week. It'll have rock on it over the winter, and then next year we will resurface that.
The Big Six Bridge, do you have a slow sign or something on that by chance, or is there any signs that say speed?
There are bump signs for the Big Six, east and west.
Yeah.
There's a bump, there's a bump with an advisory speed limit, with a bump actually between the pavement and the rock for both east and west.
Cause I was heading north on that, the road that's right beside it on Sunday.
Yeah, there's,
And a vehicle was coming, I bet he went over that bridge about 60 miles an hour, when he hit that white rock, dust and rocks are flying everywhere.
yeah, we don't have a speed limit, but we have advisory plates or advisory up there, so.
East and west, you got stop signs.
North and
North and
south.
south.
North and
Yeah,
south
stop
stop signs. East and west are flying.
Yeah.
Resurfacing, we're shouldering, they're shouldering, they should be finished up with shouldering the end of this week, and then they got traffic marking on it, and that'll be all completed. There's a bridge up in Hebron Township, Lincoln Township, section 11. They will be driving piling this week. We're crushing gravel down at McGuire Pit. They got a good start on that the end of this week. there'll be close to 50,000 there, so. Highway 169 bridge, I just received notice from the DOT. They believe that November 30, that'll be open to traffic. They still have some shoulder work, sub-drain, traffic marking and rumble strips to get in that. Excuse me, that is the Highway 18 project, the November 30th. And then the 169 bridge, I got the approaches, barrier rail, and paved shoulders to complete, and they're looking at the November 15th as being the date of opening that bridge. We're still looking for a mechanic, a Laverne operator, a Lone Rock operator, and also operator at our mechanic, the transfer station. And we do have a safety meeting planned for Friday, this Friday coming up, out at the Nature Center, and if any of the board would like to attend that, you're more than welcome.
Starts at 8.
8 o'clock, yes.
What fourth the other day on that road that goes by Donnie Besh's, that new overlay, they had that all striped. Pavement, the shoulders were down and it was striped. How
Yeah,
come the first section was striped yet?
they are still shouldering, or the Laverne section, it is striped.
It's striped?
Yeah.
I just drove out last night, I guess I didn't pay attention.
Yeah, that one is complete,
Oh, it's done.
yes.
Okay. I guess when you're half tired going home, you don't see it.
That's all that I have.
Anything else for Doug? Pretty much, I'm gonna take a 15-minute break, I'm ready.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, so.
How you doing?